Good evening, everyone. Today, God is good and God is good all the time. Happy Mardi Gras. Happy Mardi Gras. I hope you're enjoying yourself and being safe. Don't get too close to the flow. But I have a word for you on today. Rules for a priest. Being a priest, being a prophet, we all are still working under God. You know, so now God will give Moses rules for his priests, Aaron and his two sons. Aaron is the high priest. And then got the two sons, the two youngest sons. You remember the two older sons got consumed by fire. You did an authorized fire, without God consent. So the priest must not make himself a ceremony, unclean for any of his people who die. So they can't make a ceremony. They can't do a ceremony for everyone. It has to be. That's why God come up with these rules. They have to follow His rules, all to be a priest, because God is the one that anointed them, put the oil on for them to be the priest. Says so. So except for the close relatives, such as your mother, your father, your son, your daughter, your brother, unmarried sister, you must not make himself unclean for people, related to him by marriage, and so define himself. So when you do ceremony, they're talking about, you do a ceremony for someone that's died. But so in other words, God don't want them to be near a dead body. Unless it's a relative. Because all the relatives is the Israelite. Anybody that's outside the Israelite, they cannot do that ceremony. Because God wants them not near other dead bodies. Because Aaron and his two sons are holy. God made them holy once He put that arrow on them. So certain things they cannot be around, certain things they cannot do to continue on being holy. So the ceremony unclean, for any of His people who died, meaning touching a dead body. So God wants to keep it in the family, because His priest is holy. God made them holy. And, all of them is the Israelite, So, they got other people around them living in a land where they at. So God said you cannot be around other dead bodies and do ceremony for other people. You have to keep it among your close relatives and your friends. I mean, not your friends, like your mother, your father, your sisters, your brothers. So the priest must not. These are some more rules. Now these are more rules for God priests. The priest must not shave, his head or shave off the edges of his beard. So it didn't cut off his body. So they must be holy, to their God, and must not profane, the name of their God. So they have to stay holy. They have to follow these rules. They can't take God's name in vain. And because they represent the food, they send the present of the food offering, to the Lord. To food of their God, they all is holy. So they must not marry, women that's defined, like prostitution or divorce, their husband, because the priests are holy, because they offer up the food of your God. Now consider them holy because they're under God, and God had anointed them to be a priest. So God priests are holy, so the rules they have to go by. So they cannot marry women who are defined. They only can proceed a ceremony, to unclean dead only for the close relative. So the law are holy, and who made them? The law is holy, and He made them holy. So if a priest's daughter defied himself or herself, by becoming a prostitute or disgrace for his father, it must be burned into fire. See, God don't play when it comes down to His priest. His priest is different from the prophet. They have to really be holy. And the high priest or Aaron. He had been anointed with oil, that pull all over his head and who had been ordained to wear the priestly garment. You must not let, you know, your hair become unkempt. Now, unkempt is something that you're not keeping up with. You're not keeping your hair combed. You're not keeping it clean. So God said, don't let it become unkempt. Keep your hair combed, keep it neat, and everything. So taking care of their hair. That's why God don't let their hair. That's why God said, don't let your hair become unkempt. Take care of it. Take and they tore up, they tear their clothes. So a priest cannot enter a place of their bodies. He must not make himself unclean. He cannot make himself unclean. He has to stay the way God have him. So a priest must marry a virgin. So Aaron and his two sons, to have to marry a woman that are a virgin. He must not marry a widow. Must not marry a widow. Or a divorced woman. God consider a divorced woman is unclean. So a defiant woman, only a virgin from his own people. So God wants to keep it in their own bloodline. Because God said, get a virgin woman from your own people. So that he will not be defined. Because see, all the Israel is clean for right now. So that's why he said, with this, so there will not be defined an offspring among his people. I am the Lord, who made him holy. So now God is about to give Moses rules for Aaron to pass on from generation to generation. So now God getting all this stuff in place. Remember, you get the Ten Commandments and the other rules. All these rules is for when it's settled in their land. They have to abide by all these rules. And then Aaron and the two sons is the priest. So God made them holy. So God making these rules and telling them how to continue on being holy. So now God, about to give Moses rules for Aaron to pass on to generation to come. So Moses, said to Aaron, for the generation to come, who has a defect. So anybody have a defect, may come near, to offer the food of his God. But no man, who has a defect may come near. You see what I'm saying? So whoever have a defect, God don't mind if they eat. But they can't come near Aaron and the two sons. They can't even come in the temple. But God gonna still provide for them to eat. So no man who is blind, lamb, disfigured, deformed, crippled, foot or hand, who is humpback, deaf, or eye defect. All this is unclean, and God don't want them around. Aaron and the two sons are either in a temple, but he will still provide for them and still allow them to eat the food. So no decision. Aaron, the priest who have any defect, is to come near to present the food offering to the Lord. That he has a defect. He must not come near the offering of the food of God. He may eat the most holy food of his God, but as well as the holy food. Now they can still eat the food. God can still provide for them. But yet because of his defect, he must not go near the curtain or approve the altar. The deceiving made the sanctuary that I am the Lord, who made them holy. So now Moses had told all this to Aaron. So God, Moses had got this from God. So Moses had told Aaron everything that God want him not to do. So now and also to all the Israelites. So a perfect priesthood. Because we know God is perfect. God is holy. So he want us to be close to as we ain't gonna be perfect as God. We ain't gonna be perfect as Jesus. But God's trying to get us close as possible. He anointed Aaron and the two sons to be a priest. So he's trying to get them closer as perfect as possible that they will not be 100% perfect because we came in the world as sin. But he wanted to be perfect, close as possible. So God himself is holy and perfect. That's the only one that's holy and perfect, besides Jesus. Along with the sanctified animals, which had to be unblemished, the priest who served before God. As a picture of the future, the perfect priest was Jesus, without a defect. He came on the world. He was the only one came into the world without, sin. So God produced his rule on it, his desire, that his people should see before them in his holy sanctuary, a picture of a perfect holiness, he required. So all the disabled, was still able, they all were still able to eat the holy food, but they still what were provided, by God. They are not allowed, they provided, God provided for them, to eat the holy food, but they was not allowed to serve within the sanctuary. So our perfect priest, Jesus Christ, have now produced for us the clearest, most beautiful picture of the holiness of God. He showed us the holiness of God. He started showing us and telling us how we supposed to live on this earth. All that had came from God. All the notes that Moses had wrote down, the time Jesus came along, they give all that to Jesus. Because God, remember, God had Moses, like He's doing now. Had Moses been writing all that stuff down. So time Jesus came along in the New Testament, they reached that to him, for the pass on, remember, this here is for the generation to come. So time Jesus came on the New Testament, he received all the rules and regulations that God had given to Moses to write down, for Jesus to follow along and pass it on for generation to generation. We are the generation, for us, to know the rules and regulations that God had him to write down. So the picture of the holiness of God, all who belongs to him are acceptable, able to come before him and worship and serve. So that is the rules and regulation for Aaron and his two sons. Aaron's the high priest. So all this stuff, God had Moses to write down, and for generation to, like us, generation, for us, for the priests that God have now, the priests, that's for them to also follow. So everything that's in this Bible is our guideline. Of course, yes, they made mistakes, but also for us to read and not make the same mistakes that they made. When God gives these guidelines, it wasn't just for them. That's why he said, I'm giving you this guideline for generations to come. That meaning for us, that when we came along, so this is how God want his priests to represent him. They cannot do ceremony for anybody. They had to keep it in a bloodline. So they couldn't shave their hair. So it was a lot of things. They couldn't drink no wine. That was a yesterday practice. They could not drink no wine. Because when you preaching that word and you being a priest, under God and being holy, only the way you're supposed to stay holy is being sober. That was in the last package I put out yesterday. They had to continue being sober. They could not drink no wine. They could not do none of that. Once God had made them holy, they had to maintain that. So we are still doing Bible study. So this is all the details. I'm going chapter to chapter. I know a lot of people are saying it don't make no sense or what she doing. It don't mean yes it does. Because this is a lot of rules and details. That God had Moses to write down to pass along for us. And I decided to do this so we all can learn the Bible. So we can all learn the details, how, we all know about the Israelite. We all know, but do we know the details of it up until now? So we know how the Israelite came in place. We know how it got started now. We know, we learning all the details from chapter to chapter, so we can get a better understanding of the story. We reading the story, You know, likewise, she turned into a pillar. That's all they used to hear. But now we read the story. We got the detail and the complete detail exactly how and why she got turned into a pillar. You know, so this is the purpose. I mean, it might not mean so much to a lot of other people, but we all learned the Bible. We all learned the detail of how the story took place by doing by chapter to chapter. You know, so that's all the word I have for y'all today. Happy Mardi Gras again, and I'll see y'all on the next video.